week we're going to be talking about our second Yama in the sequence, and this week we're talking about Satya. So Satya means truth. Sat, S-A-T, means truth, and Y-A means to be, to embody truth, and to be truthful. So truthfulness and honesty are something that very similar to ahimsa. We want truthfulness in our thought process. We want truthfulness in our speech and in our actions and in our behaviors and our decisions. We want all of those things to be aligned with what we know to be our personal truth and what we know to be the greater truth. So within our yoga practice, we want to make sure that the way that we're doing our postures is in a truthful way. So you're doing a pose that feels really authentic to you. And a lot of times, especially if you're taking a class, you walk into a class, maybe it's a new studio or a class that you haven't taken before, and you're not familiar with what type of level it is, or you think maybe, oh, okay, it's a higher level than what I normally do, but I'll try it and see how it goes. We can get into these tricky situations where our ego pushes us to do more than we should or more than our body really wants us to. And we think, okay, well, we live in this culture where pushing yourself is kind of the norm. We're always expected to do more, work harder, make progress. And if you're not making progress fast enough, you have to push yourself harder. And this ends up putting us in poses that aren't really authentic to our body. Maybe we have an injury that we're not acknowledging, or we're not practicing ahimsa with, and we're pushing ourselves farther than we should, or we're practicing in a way that we feel like we have to practice. So maybe you're always doing a power yoga practice when you feel like you need to relax more and you need to do a yin practice, or maybe it's the opposite way around and you're doing lots of really slow, gentle practices, but you're not actually giving your body the movement and the energy that it needs. Maybe you need to do a more active practice. So figuring out what you honestly need and being able to have an honest conversation with yourself about what it is that you really need to create that sense of balance. So being deliberate and being authentic in our yoga poses, when we're on our mat, we're practicing these skills so that we can take those skills off of our mat, so that when we walk out the door from doing our practice, we can live the rest of our life in a way that is very deliberate and very authentic. So part of this authenticity that we're trying to strive for is this process of when we think something or when we say we're going to do something, that we do actually do it. It's kind of this old school idea of giving someone your word about doing something. And if you gave someone your word, you were pretty much bound to it. You were going to do that thing, or you were held to that standard that they would expect you to be truthful and honest and carry through with whatever commitment you had made. And this has kind of fallen by the wayside. We don't really hold people to that same standard like we used to. But in terms of being a yogi or practicing yoga, if you really follow Satya, it's up to you to govern yourself and the way that you interact with the people around you, and hold yourself to the standard of being truthful and being honest. If you tell someone you're going to do something, or you agree to some sort of an obligation, make sure that you carry through with that. Don't be flaky or constantly let plans fall through, or say that you're going to do something and then change your mind later. So you want to let go of that fickleness and make sure that you're actually sticking to what you say that you're going to do. And some of this is really an internal truthfulness. You have to be truthful when you make those decisions about what you can handle. So a lot of us have a tendency to overcommit ourselves. We say that we can do all of these different things, and you might really have good intentions to do all those things, but you weren't quite honest with yourself when you signed up for X, Y, and Z, and you've overcommitted yourself. So you end up having to break commitments in order to get through. So it's really important to stop and give yourself some space when you're making decisions and before you actually agree to do things, to make sure that you're going to be able to carry through with them. And of course, we all make mistakes sometimes. So if you're practicing Satya and you're working on being more truthful and more authentic in the way that you live and in the interactions that you have with other people, of course we're going to have times when we slip up or we make mistakes, and that's when we go back to our practice of ahimsa. And we don't beat ourselves up over that mistake. We practice kindness and compassion, and then we go right back into practicing Satya and trying to be truthful and honest with ourselves. But as we go back into it, we know ourselves a little bit better from just observing and watching the way that we make mistakes, so that the next time we can make the necessary changes and be more authentic in the way that we make decisions. So if you think about what it's like to live a life that's unauthentic, it's a process of feeling really drained. It's like you're constantly playing a part or pretending. You're not really fully living the way that you want to live, and that's absolutely exhausting. Whereas if you flip that over to the opposite end of being authentic and being really sincere in the way that you live and the way that you present yourself and the things that you say to people, that's really empowering, because you have this strong trust within yourself. You wake up in the morning and you know that the thoughts that you have are going to come out as speech that you really mean, and those things that you say that you really mean, you're going to carry through and you're going to actually do them and make them happen. So it gives you this really strong, empowered feeling, because you know that you're not going to be all over the map and be really flaky. So your word is strong when you're practicing Satya. When we start to move this down into our yoga practice, when we want to try to pull it onto our mat and really focus on embodying Satya, the practice that I've put together is a practice that focuses on the throat chakra. We really think about truthfulness and being honest as something that we say. We don't want to say anything that's a lie. So we start out with clearing out the throat chakra and making sure that we don't have any blockages there. This is a place where the ego can come out a lot, and that's the source of a lot of different lies that we say. We will often lie if maybe we've done something wrong and we don't want to admit that we were wrong, or we're trying to cover our tracks, or we're trying to get out of something that we didn't necessarily want to do in the first place. We're going to start to put together either some little white lies or maybe some bigger lies to fix that situation and protect the ego. So when the ego is too strong, then it starts to fight with this concept of Satya. When we have this clear space at the throat chakra and we have an inner strength that we don't have to worry about the ego being fragile or being too sensitive, we can take it if somebody is honest with us or if we're honest with ourselves. That strength and that feeling of being empowered is really important to be able to be truthful. So the practice is a lot about opening up the throat space and doing poses that are very strong, warrior poses and things like that, that make us feel really empowered. The pranayama that we're using is lion's breath, because this is a very cleansing breath, and when you do lion's breath, it's a strange looking breath. You make this strange face, you stick your tongue out, you're pressing through your arms, and doing lion's breath, I feel like you can't really take yourself too seriously when you're doing that breath, because you just look kind of silly. And it is something that definitely helps us to let go of that ego. Like, okay, I'm just going to do this breath, I'm going to push everything out as hard as I can. And when you do that, it creates this sense of space and this sense of freedom. So that's going to all be tied together with our mantra and our mudra. So our mantra for this practice is Satnam. It's the perfect mantra for this idea of truthfulness, and it's actually in the word Satya. Sat, which means truth, and then Nam, which is my name or my identity. So Satnam means truth is my identity. It is a mantra that we very typically use in Kundalini yoga practice, and we'll actually do a Kundalini Kriya in our practice to go with this board. But the mudra that we use for Sat Kriya, when we chant Satnam, which is interlacing all the fingers, taking your index fingers up toward the sky, and crossing your thumbs. Now, female is going to cross the left thumb on top, male is going to cross the right thumb on top. So it's a little bit different for male and female, or whatever you identify yourself as. But the reason that I like this mudra is that it traditionally is symbolic of letting go of negativity and drawing in positivity. There's this exchange. But for me, the shape of the hand and the fact that we usually hold it up over the head with this single point reminds me of the saying that I learned when I was at the Satchidananda ashram in Virginia. And it was, the Swami's saying was, "Truth is one, paths are many, let us live in peace and joy." So the ultimate truth, there is only one ultimate truth, but the paths to find that are very different. We're all on a different journey to try and get there, and we need to give each other the space to do that peacefully and joyfully. Even if somebody else's journey is different from ours, we're all going to the same truth. So it's a really important concept that I feel like is embodied with the practice of this mudra. So pulling this all together and drawing this into our practice on our mat so that we can practice being truthful with ourselves and seeing what our reaction is. If you're in a class and they're doing a certain pose and maybe you know that your body truthfully should not be in that pose, or maybe should be in a modified version of that pose, see how your ego reacts to that. And you're just kind of watching what happens. Whatever thoughts or feelings rise up, watch them. And then be honest with yourself and see what the reaction is to that. Little by little, you'll get used to it. It's a really important practice to be able to be truthful with yourself. Just like ahimsa, we have to practice ahimsa and kindness to ourselves before we're able to give it to others. We have to be truthful with ourselves and set that standard of truthfulness within ourselves before we're able to constantly be truthful with everyone that we come in contact with. But it is a constant evolution throughout our life. We're not expected to be perfect right away. Like all things in yoga, it's a practice. But it is one of the most challenging yamas to really enact every day in our life, because we're so used to being able to bend things the way that we need them to be. But we'll practice this in our physical practice and then work on carrying it out with us as we leave our mat. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste.